Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress. I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue reading in the book Codeword Barbelon by P.D. Stuart. The full title, Codeword Barbelon, 666, Danger in the Vatican, the Sons of Loyola and Their Plans for World Domination. Book one of a two-book series by P.D. Stuart, the second of which I'm told is available now. I have a copy of it, so it must be available. And currently reading it and make an assessment of it as soon as I get a little bit further in the book. But I can tell you, after having read this book now for nearly at least 4 times now, this book is a stunner. This book must be on every coffee table in America to fully understand this Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order. If there's any hope for Protestantism to survive in this country, for religious liberty to be maintained in this country, for anything that could be described as liberty to be maintained in this country, the American people have to understand the information that's in this book. This is one of the most important and valuable books available today. And I highly encourage my listeners to go to www.luxverbi.org and order the book today. luxverbi.org. Now, because I have not progressed very far in chapter 31 of the book, and due to the importance of the material of this chapter, and because of the weekend break and other things that have happened, I'm going to return to the beginning of this chapter, just a page and a half, if you'll indulge me, to recapture your attention and to focus your minds on the Revolutionary War. Now, previous chapter we talked about the Civil War, but we're going to back up to the Revolutionary War and learn information that has never been told the American people, that clearly suggests that the Vatican had everything to do with the Revolutionary War to separate the colonies from Protestant Great Britain control, so that Catholicism could get a foothold here in the colonies and to bide its time, to gain power and strength and influence, and to finally take control of the country. And that's where we are today. So to understand where we are today, and Rome's status in our government, and Rome's level of control, we have to see with our own eyes the Vatican's purpose in fomenting the Revolutionary War to separate the colonies from Protestantism in Great Britain. The chapter is chapter 31. The title is The Revolutionary War, How America Became a Jesuit Enclave. If you're reading along in the book, it's page 305. The author writes, "We now come to another highly interesting portion of American history, which you would be hard-pressed to find in the history books. The part played by the Jesuits in the American Revolutionary War, the War of Independence, 1776 to 1783. We've seen the role of the Jesuits in the American Civil War, but what part, if any, did they play in the earlier war that transformed America from a collection of independent states to a United States of America? The informed and partisan historians will tell us that this war was mainly, if not entirely, due to the arbitrary and intolerable acts of the British government, leading to the American colonists' desire to break with British rule. We'll now venture to shed some light on this dimly reported aspect of American history and offer you a very different and, we hope, more correct view. That religion played a major role in the American Revolution is beyond dispute. Now, I'll just stop and tell you, prior to now, you've never been told. Most likely, you've never been told that religion had anything to do with the American Revolution from Great Britain. But listen to what the author says. That religion played a major role in the American Revolution is beyond dispute. In 1776, the time of the Declaration of Independence, there were little over 25,000 Catholics in all of the 13 colonies. 1% of the 2.5 million total population. There were only 23 priests in all, and the next highest authority was the Vicar Apostolic in London, who had jurisdiction over the British colonies and satellites in America. The Revolutionary War of Independence soon changed that. The reason there were so few Catholics and so many more Protestants was because the foundation of the great democracy that is today called the United States of America was laid when millions of European Protestants fled the oppression of the Roman Catholic Church in Europe to seek freedom of conscience and freedom of religion in the mostly uninhabited wilderness of North America. In the main, the settlers were resolved not to duplicate in the New World what they had fled from on the Old Continent. These settlers felt that the Pope, as a foreign ruler, should not be allowed to meddle in the politics or laws of America, as they suspected that would render it difficult for immigrants, especially Catholics, to be fully loyal to their new country and its fledgling Republican values. Naturally, there was a fear of Roman Catholics, not unlike the fear many Americans today have of Muslim fundamentalists. After all, these early Protestant pilgrims had recently escaped the hands of their Catholic compatriots. In those days, people took their Catholicism seriously, so much so that several states passed laws regulating the activities of Roman Catholics. For example, in 1647, a Massachusetts statute declared that every Roman Catholic priest was an, quote, incendiary and disturber of the public peace and safety, and an enemy of true Christian religion. The early American settlers suspected that the Pope was seeking to meddle in the affairs of the United States to undermine its Republican values, which they said was evidenced by the oath that every Roman Catholic bishop was required to take. Quote, I will, to the utmost of my power, seek out and oppose schismatics, heretics, in other words, Protestants, and the enemies of our sovereign Lord, the Pope, and his successors, unquote. However, the period following the restorations of the Jesuits in 1814 saw a tremendous growth in their numbers and influence in America, as evidenced by the large number of Jesuit colleges and universities established on that continent in that century. 22 of the society's now 28 universities. In those days, says historian Rene Philip Miller, one of Benjamin Franklin's friends was a Jesuit. This was John Carroll, who had been brought up in Maryland of Irish parentage. He would later become the Archbishop of Baltimore and go on to establish the Jesuit University of Georgetown in a suburb of the city of Washington, D.C., the federal capital, the first Catholic educational institution in the United States, unquote. According to Robert Emmett Curran, in his bicentennial history of Georgetown University, the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, quote, resolved in 1786 to found Georgetown University to supply for Catholics in the new republic the clergy, listen to this, whom the society had provided previously, unquote. That tells you that the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, provided the clergy in the colonies, the Roman Catholic clergy in the colonies. Now, John Carroll was born in 1735 in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. After receiving a Jesuit education at Bohemia in Cecil County, Maryland, Carroll studied abroad at Jesuit colleges in Europe. He was forced to flee Europe when the Jesuits were expelled from Sweden under the decree of Pope Clement XIV in 1773. And on August 15, 1790, Reverend John Carroll, the Jesuit priest, was appointed the first Catholic bishop in the United States of America, being consecrated on the Feast of Assumption. At the time, the papacy not only had to deal with the concerns of Americans that these revolutionary Jesuit outcasts were migrating to America, it also had to quell the fears of the American people that the Catholic Church in America was itself no more than a Trojan horse for the installation of a foreign ruler, the Pope. To overcome these suspicions, the Jesuit priest John Carroll advised the Pope to have the portion of the priestly oath, the bishop's oath, which required allegiance to the Pope above all others, removed from the American bishop's pledge. This was done to avoid giving offense to the principles of the Constitution. Those are Protestant principles, aren't they? It says this was done to avoid giving offense to the principles of the Constitution and to calm, I'll add the word Protestant, to calm the Protestant fears that the Catholic bishops were merely puppets of the Pope on American soil or on Protestant soil. Was any of this ever included in your history books, whether it be in high school or college? Now, continue with the book. Here is the mechanism by which the Vatican fomented a separation, animosity between the colonies and Protestant Great Britain. The subtitle is The Intolerable Acts. The author writes, in order to achieve the objectives of the Roman Pontiff, that is, the Pope, whom I call the biblical Antichrist, and I insist that's true, the Jesuits, aided by their illuminated Masonic vassals in America, instigated the American War of Independence. Now, I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but remember that when the Jesuits were suppressed in 1773, Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit priest and professor of canon law at Ingolstadt University, provided an underground for them so that they could continue their diabolical, Jesuitical search or assault on the world to create a new world order for the Pope. It was called the Illuminati. It was simply a resurrection of the old Spanish Alumbrados. And if you follow the lineage of this, it goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. But we're not going to go into that. So the Jesuits went into the Illuminati and resurfaced in American Freemasonry. Now, some researchers insist that at this time, during the Revolution, that Freemasonry wasn't Illuminized. In other words, it wasn't Jesuitized. But history clearly indicates that Rome had a huge influence in the Revolutionary War. And to suggest that the Jesuits, even with their knowledge of John Carroll, even with the admission that the priests in the colonies were provided by the Jesuit order, it can't be doubted that the Jesuits influenced at least some of the Freemasons who were in this country. And this evidence is going to, the evidence presented in this book is going to make this inarguable. All right. In order to achieve the objective of the Pope, the Jesuits, aided by their illuminated Freemasons, their Masonic vassals in America, instigated the American War of Independence. Okay, this is the Freemasons, or the Jesuits within the Freemasons, instigated the American War of Independence to separate the colonies from Great Britain. Now, if you understand that Freemasonry is Jesuitism, then you understand why they wanted the colony separated from Protestant Great Britain. And it says, leading Masonic authors openly claim that Freemasonry had a preponderant role in the movement for independence. The Masonic Review, an official magazine of Freemasonry, the Masonic Review of 1893, goes as far as to state that Freemasonry was the driving force in the formation of the American Union in 1776, claiming that at least 52 out of the 56 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence as members of the Lodge. They claim in an official Masonic publication that 52 out of the 56 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were members of the Masonic Lodge. And it says Charles Carroll, John Carroll's brother, was a signer. And I'm suggesting that Charles Carroll was a Freemason. Though he was a Catholic, he was a Freemason. Charles Carroll was a Freemason. He was an Illuminized Freemason. He, too, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was once Lord Baltimore of Maryland. All right? He had a great deal to do with the formation of our government, our present federal government. Most of the land for what is now Washington, D.C. came from Charles Carroll, a devout, Tridentine, Irish Roman Catholic of blue blood heritage. And he had a mission in this country, and he accomplished his mission in this country, and you cannot understand what happened during the formation of the colonies and the formation of our Protestant government, until what I call the Protestant government now is debatable because of the influence of John Carroll and Charles Carroll and others. You can't understand what controls Washington, D.C. to this day until you understand the role that Charles Carroll and his Jesuit priest brother provided in the colonies. Once you understand the influence of Charles Carroll and the Jesuit priest John Carroll, their influence and their activities during this critical formative period in our nation's history, then you can understand what's going on in Washington, D.C., and especially the significance of Georgetown University, Jesuit Georgetown University. And this Carroll family is almost universally ignored by researchers. And it's beginning to look very suspicious why people don't give the Carroll family the scrutiny that they so obviously deserve. Now, for anybody out there that's looking for a project to help explain what we're suffering in this country today, I suggest that you go to Maryland or get every piece of information that you can find on the Carroll family from Maryland during the War of Independence. Now, continuing, by encouraging Britain to effect into legislation a series of unreasonable and quote-unquote intolerable acts, which is the name given by the American patriots to 5 laws adopted by the British Parliament in 1774, the secret operatives helped create a state of deep resentment and rebellion in the hearts of the American colonists. So these quote-unquote intolerable acts perpetrated by what we believed was a Protestant British Parliament is what fomented the unrest between the colonies and Great Britain. And you can only imagine that it was Freemasonry in Britain that controlled the British Parliament. And they were working with their Illuminized Freemasons in this country to make sure that break between the colonies and Protestant Britain was brought into effect. And now we've got Freemasons on both sides of the pond working for the same end. The colonies and what is now known as the United States of America is going to make a break with its Protestant heritage for a very, very powerful reason, which we're seeing unfolding before our very eyes today. By encouraging Great Britain to effect into legislation a series of unreasonable and intolerable acts, the secret operatives, Freemasons and Jesuits working together, helped to create a state of deep resentment and rebellion in the hearts of the American colonists. It says one such intolerable act was a new government tax scheme on imports of tea. This is what happened behind the scenes. Now listen carefully, because this isn't in your history books. Two Scottish Rite Freemasons, Paul Revere and another Masonic brother, Joseph Warren, one of George Washington's generals, were members of the oldest lodge in America, St. Andrew, named after a Roman Catholic saint, St. Andrew in Boston. George Washington himself was initiated into the Fredericksburg Lodge in 1752. This Boston Lodge was based in the Green Dragon Tavern, remembered by some as the headquarters of the American Revolution. The Boston Tea Party operated from that lodge. The Boston Tea Party opposed the new tax on tea imports and employed various means of civil and criminal disobedience, including the blocking of non-British ships to port. All right, are you getting this? They fomented the raise on taxes on tea, and then they fomented the raise of taxes on tea by the Freemasons in England, and then the Freemasons in the colonies organized the rebellion. Doesn't this sound Jesuitical? That's exactly what it is. Jesuits operating on both sides of the conflict, creating conflict between two nations who were in peace, to encourage them to deeds of blood. That's straight out of the Jesuit oath. And that's the Jesuit signature on this entire process. Now, the American people are not wise to this. And they're just following their leaders, just like we always do. But the Jesuits create the problem, and they also work on the other side. It's heads I win, tails you lose. And the American people have to wake up to this. We simply have to wake up to how the Jesuits operate in this country. To understand what happened during this period of time, we can clearly understand all the smoke and mirrors and rabbit holes that we see put before us today. And I could get into a great long dissertation about that, but I won't. I'll stay focused on the book. We'll talk about this when we get back from the break. You're listening to the Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of HourOfTheTruth.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Have you seen the Left Behind movies? Have you read the Left Behind fictional book series? Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. Because they see the world stage shaping to fulfill what they have been led to believe is sound biblical interpretation, a left behind rapture scenario, this false view of prophecy is reinforced in the mind, not only of its adherents, but also includes those who have been merely exposed to the specific media. Is it possible that false prophecy can be fulfilled? The rapture theories have always been in dispute. Pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib disputes have risen up in exclusively evangelical circles of recent history, so that when true believers don't suddenly disappear, this element will easily go by the wayside when all see a new Jewish temple begin to be built. Will this be part of the great delusion that will come upon the whole earth? It seems that this great prophetic delusion has already overcome practically the entire American evangelical and Christian world. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. To learn more, visit crosstheborder.org. That's CROSS, crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, welcome back to the second half of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you enjoy Inquisition Update, please support Inquisition Update by supporting FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And we're continuing in the book Codeword Barbelon by P.D. Stuart. And we've just learned some rare truth about what fomented the Revolutionary War. And we're going to continue with our understanding now of information that has been perfectly and purposely hidden from the American people. Critical information that helps us make sense of what we see taking place in the world today. Now, first, we've talked about these intolerable acts perpetrated upon the colonies by a supposedly Protestant British Parliament that raised all kinds of resentment in the colonies for Britain and fomented a spirit of revolution in the colonies for a very, very specific purpose. Having dealt with the Boston Tea Party, we're going to now talk. You can't foment a revolution just by raising taxes on tea. So what else did the Jesuits and the Freemasons do in this country? It says next, the British Parliament, and I'll just tell you that the British Parliament was Protestant, and they were sympathetic to the Protestants who fled the continent of Europe to flee from popish persecution and Inquisition. But Protestant Great Britain, Protestant Parliament, was influenced also by Jesuitized Freemasonry. And it says next, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, considered by the American colonists as another, quote-unquote, intolerable act. And you can bet your fanny that these Jesuitized Freemasons in this country were calling these acts intolerable acts. They're the ones who coined the terms. You know, the buzzword that spread like fire. Intolerable acts. Intolerable acts. These are intolerable acts from Great Britain Parliament. While across the Atlantic, their brother Freemasons, their brother Jesuits and brother Freemasons were creating these intolerable acts. All right? Next, the Stamp Act, considered by the American colonists as another intolerable act. But by far the worst and most notable of these quote-unquote intolerable acts was the Quebec Act. Passed on May 20th, 1774, it received the royal assent, in other words, the approval of the British Crown, on July 22nd, 1774, which attempted to cede all the territory west of the Appalachian Mountains and north of the Ohio River to Canada, which at that time was essentially Catholic Quebec. All right, the government of Canada is Catholic. And we're going to learn more about this. So here we have a huge, huge portion of this country, already inhabited by Protestants, going to be given over to Catholic Canada. This is called the Quebec Act. And it says, in particular, the legislation purported to extend the Catholic province of Quebec south and west to the Ohio River and the Mississippi River, and into western colonies of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Virginia, taking land that many Protestant colonists had already claimed. That this was a deliberately provocative act, the legislative extension of the province of Quebec into so large an area of what was to become the United States, is seen from the fact that Quebec, Canada's largest province, is 3 times the size of France and 7 times the size of Great Britain. In other words, Quebec is a huge province in Canada, all Catholic, and they're going to give a huge portion of the Protestant colonies to Catholic Canada. Now, this would outrage any Protestant with a brain, and it ought to outrage us today. We ought to understand what this is all about and who's fomenting this, and for what purpose. It says, thus the Catholics of Quebec had more than ample land to expand within Quebec, plus the vast expanse that is Canada. So what on earth is a so-called Protestant parliament in Great Britain giving so much of the colonial land to Roman Catholic Canada? Further, and curiously, the Quebec Act of 1774 established Catholicism as the official religion in what was, at the time, the British colony of Canada. All right, Great Britain had control of Canada, just as she had control of the colonies. Protestantism was the religion of the state in Britain. So you must ask yourself, why in the world are they giving so much land to Canada from the colonies, and plus establishing Catholicism as the official state religion of Canada? Something doesn't add up here. That's the point that needs to be made. Is Great Britain truly Protestant, or is it Catholic? And you're going to find, if you do any research into the history of Great Britain, you're going to find out that there were many Catholics sitting on the British throne, sworn by a Protestant oath, who were not Protestants at all, but Catholics. And they had the same problem in the Parliament, which was notoriously, quote-unquote, Protestant. But they were greatly influenced by a Catholic influence, by people professing Protestantism, but were really Catholics in the Parliament. And I'm telling you, it's the same problem we have today in Congress. Those who profess the evangelical faith and yet vote positively on Catholic agendas in this country must be viewed with extreme suspicion in this country. We're simply carrying on the duplicitous activities that the Catholic Church fomented in Protestant Great Britain. This is a war, ladies and gentlemen. This is not just a little struggle. Look what they did back in the revolutionary days, when it was fresh in every Protestant mind, the Holy Roman Inquisition. And what the Protestant Reformation was all about, that the Pope was the biblical Antichrist and the Roman Catholic Church was the very church of Satan itself. And look what they did with that widespread knowledge and understanding. They created this revolution away from Protestant Great Britain. Think what power they have today when these realities are completely forgotten in this country. Look at the potential they have to control this country, to the destruction of the unwitting Protestants in this country. Well, you just have to comprehend it, and it's going to take a while. It's going to take some painful research and some terrible admissions. All right, it says further, and curiously, the Quebec Act of 1774 established Catholicism as the official religion in what was at the time the British colony of Canada. It should have been Protestant, shouldn't it? Why did British Parliament make Canada Catholic? And why did they want to give so much Protestant land to the Catholics in Canada? And it says, in conformity with the practice in Catholic countries of the day, it provided for trials without jury. This is Roman Catholic canon law, people. This is what's going to happen in this country when Catholicity, the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church rules supreme. This is what's going to happen. All we have to do is look at history, and we can predict with accuracy what is going to happen when Catholicism becomes the official state religion of the United States of America. Oh, they're going to call it Christianity. The Tea Party people now, the tea baggers they're called, cynically, it's still a Freemasonic and Jesuit recreation of what they did during the Revolutionary period. And what it accomplishes is they use Islam as a boogeyman in this country to drag the Protestants back to the Roman Catholic Church in the teabagger movement. The Tea Party movement is for no other purpose than to strengthen the power of Catholicism in this country. And you're going to find Freemasons and Jesuits behind the whole damn thing, and you better open your eyes and look at this. When you see the Tea Party movement, what's on all their signs? This is a Christian country. This is a Christian country aimed at the Muslims, see? I mean, we've had all the Muslim terror. We've had the Malvo sniper incident. We've had the so-called Muslim military base attack. We've had the Muslims so-called who did 9/11. We've had all kinds of Muslim talk in the press, in the mainstream media, the alternative media. Everybody talks about the Muslims day in and day out. Nobody ever talks about the Roman Catholic Church. Rome's behind all this, people. There weren't any Muslims involved in 9/11. That was our own Jesuit-controlled government. They've used the press, they've used the churches, they've used every means available, 24/7, 365, to focus all of our attention on Islam. Do you realize that there are more Buddhists in this country than there are Muslims? Muslim terror, my eye. Compare it with the terror that is conducted by our own government. And then ask yourself, who controls our government? Is it Islam that controls our government? You got to be kidding. Every principal player on 9/11 was a Knight of Malta. Just do the research. They're using Islam as a boogeyman. And the teabagger movement uses Islam as a boogeyman to unite all the Protestants back to the Roman Catholic Church. By the day, Rome is gaining strength from Protestant blood. And that's whose blood is going to spill when Rome finally completes her agenda in this country through the teabagger movement. I call it Inquisition. That's why this program's called Inquisition Update. We're literally hiring our own executioner. We're hiring our own inquisitor. We're going to lose our Protestant liberties. In the name of Christianity, we're giving up Christianity. Nobody in the teabagger movement is ever going to tell you that the Christianity that they decide they want for this country is not the Christianity of the Bible. It is Catholicism. It's not Christianity at all. That's why they wanted to separate these colonies from Protestant Great Britain so Catholics could control it. And chances are your pastor and your church supports this teabagger movement because they're ecumenical. They want to go back to Rome. They want you to believe the Muslims are the big boogeyman. That Sharia law is so terrible. And it is, trust me, it is. I'm not making any excuses or any kind of endorsement of Islam. It's a diabolical religion, but you have to understand Islam is just one of the harlot daughters of Rome. Rome created Islam. Muhammad's wife was a Catholic nun. You didn't hear that in your history books either, did you? You don't hear it from the pulpits of your churches either. They don't want you to know. And when you know this information, everything that happens in this country all of a sudden makes perfect sense. Rome's at the helm in this country. She's just rustling up all the help she can get from the Protestants so she can have her way. And her way is trials without jury, denial of representative assembly, denial of your liberty of conscience, denial of your liberty of religion, denial of your liberty to peaceably assemble in the name of Christ and read a King James Version Bible and talk about a future kingdom of heaven, a heavenly kingdom. No, the Pope wants you to go along with an earthly kingdom. That's what the ecumenical movement's all about. That's what the teabagger movement's all about. That's what every movement in this country is all about. That's what the big Islamic boogeyman is all about. It's all about creating a global government, a global religion, and a global economic system controlled by the biblical Antichrist, the Pope of Rome. What you see in the press today, what you see in the media, the mainstream media, the alternative media, the churches, from the government, from every newspaper in this country that talks incessantly about this Muslim threat, is the biggest CIA, Vatican, Jesuit psyop that the world has ever seen. And I've tried to tell the truth about this on Inquisition Update on amateur radio, and all hell breaks loose. Because I'm going up against all of that power. And they called me a CIA psyop. Yeah, they call Inquisition Update and amateur radio operator KC0EBM a CIA psyop. Unbelievable. Okay. Further and curiously, the Quebec Act of 1774 established Catholicism as the official religion in what was at the time the British colony of Canada. And in conformity with the practice in Catholic countries of the day, it provided for trials without jury, denied representative assembly. The simultaneous passage of the Quebec Act and the coercive acts of the British Parliament led the colonists to angrily declare that the Quebec Act was an immoral pact between Britain and Popery. And it was. But it was fomented by the Jesuits and the Freemasons operating on both sides of the conflict, commensurate with the Jesuit oath. He says, what's surprising about this is that the British, who were supposed to be Protestants, included a provision in the Quebec Act expressly providing for Canada to remain under the exclusive control of the Roman Catholic religion, and this provision was to apply to the newly ceded territory, all of the territory west of the Appalachian Mountains and north of the Ohio River. Protestant land. The terms included the stipulation that, quote, the exercise of the Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman religion shall be maintained, unquote. This was most curious, coming from a supposedly Protestant power, says the author, P.D. Stuart, and I have to agree, wouldn't you? The British American colonists, mostly Protestants, were naturally outraged, declaring the war to be one of the most intolerable acts. Declaring the Quebec Act to be one of the most intolerable acts of the British Parliament. Historian Martin Griffin writes that it caused a good deal of patriotic indignation and was widely considered by the people on both sides of the Atlantic to have contributed in no small part to the Revolution of 1776. The American colonists lambasted the Quebec Act, denouncing it and the attendance of the French alliance as a dagger aimed at the heart, as a betrayal of their religious heritage and a Trojan horse. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what Catholicism is in this country today. It's not Christianity. It's not one of us. It's a Trojan horse, and it was wheeled into this country even before the Revolutionary War to deceive God's people so that when the time was right, they could spring themselves free from the Trojan horse and kill us all, and that's what they're going to do. That is what they're going to do. It's called Inquisition. It says the colonists issued an address written by the people of England in which they expressed, quote, our astonishment that a British Parliament should ever consent to establish in that country, that is Canada, a religion that has deluged your island, England, in blood and dispersed impiety, spread impiety, sin all over the land, bigotry, persecution, murder, regicide, inquisitions, rebellions, gunpowder plots, and every other atrocity, not only in Britain, but every part of the world. And I ad-libbed there a little bit, but the author makes the point. It's verified in history. It cannot be denied, even by the Roman Catholic Church, the atrocities that she's committed against God's people for 2,000 years. And how a so-called British Parliament could declare Roman Catholicism the official religion of Canada has to raise the eyebrows of the dead. Indeed, we must question and regard as very suspicious indeed the eagerness shown by a Protestant king, George III, to thus favor the Catholic faith in one of its Protestant colonies with so gracious a grant of American territory, a Protestant territory, to Roman Catholics. He says another of the intolerable acts was the earlier Quartering Act of March 24, 1765, under which the king sent large numbers of British troops to Boston, and then demanded that the colonists, the Protestant colonists, must house them in private homes if necessary, and feed them too, and if they did not do so, they would get shot. The reader will realize that these acts served no useful purpose to the British Crown, the Protestant British Crown, and were clearly inflammatory acts meant to provoke a radical response from the colonists, as they certainly did. It has been said that these intolerable acts were orchestrated by the agency of the Jesuits in England, who had the ear of the king. Do you doubt this? Read again this part of the Jesuit oath of induction, as recorded in chapter 7 of this book. Quote, you, speaking of the Jesuit, the Jesuit taking the oath, you have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood, involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in communities, provinces, and countries that were independent and prosperous and enjoying the blessings of peace. There you have it. Right out of the Jesuit oath. And I've got a Catholic critic that's listening today. He insists that that oath is phony, bogus, Protestant baloney. But all you have to do is look at the acts of the Jesuits. They follow that bogus oath to the letter. That oath is genuine, if not by the very acts demonstrated by the Jesuits and the Freemasons in this country. And you better wake up to it, because they're nearing the finish line for their papal, Jesuit, New World Order, and you're not welcome. See you tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Stay tuned for Nicholas Arthur's Cross the Border.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.